Do you enjoy networking, Liz?
Enjoy is a loaded term.
Do you
put up with. Yeah,
okay.
put up with.
You put up with it.
Yeah.
Today we are talking about, is networking worth it?
Let's talk about it.
Welcome to NetNet with Lizzy and Lissa, where we analyze hidden costs and empower you to make your own damn decisions in life. Each episode covers a different facet of life, and at the end of each episode, we each give our takes on whether we think something is net positive or net negative.
I'm Lizzy, a strategist and consultant with almost 20 years of experience in finance and investing.
And I'm Lissa, a personal finance expert and a certified financial planner. We're best friends who talk about money
and everything else.
Is networking worth it?
First up, running the numbers on networking.
In an article by University Lab Partners, they say that there was a CNBC report that said... This is like the inception of stats. Okay, let's just say CNBC reported 70% of all jobs are not published publicly, and 80% of jobs are filled through personal and professional contacts. That feels high, but is that true?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Maybe like for small business.
Yeah,
and stuff.
small businesses. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, Novo Resume says that more than 95% of professionals say that face-to-face meetings are necessary for business.
So not virtual, like got to be face-to-face.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. They also say in that same study that even though nearly 100% of people agree that networking is essential, they all agree that it's hard to keep in touch with people they meet. Studies show that less than 50% manage to stay in touch with their network.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. According to a study on app and social media usage, 84% of people use LinkedIn to strengthen their professional network.
Well, we know there's more to life than numbers and statistics, so let's talk about it. Is networking worth it? Is it worth your time to go out and talk to people, mingle, talk about surface level things?
Talk about whatever.
Yeah, just to try to get an in your career.
Well, first let's talk about the costs of networking.
Yeah.
So the most obvious one is probably time and energy. You might have to go to an event. You have to set up time to get coffee or have some type of meeting. For me, the biggest cost is the emotional and mental energy. Making small talk.
Small talk is what I meant, surface level.
Yeah, it's really hard for me. I would rather talk in front of an auditorium than have a one-on-one conversation with a stranger. So the mental, okay, I'm going to go talk to people. I'm going to strike up a conversation. I'm going to listen I'm going to try to remember their name. I'm going to care and not get drained. That's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot for people. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people.
Do you consider yourself an extrovert or an introvert?
I've always said I'm an ambivert, but the thing is, I'm very good at it. It just drains the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing is once I am in that mode, I'm very good. So a lot of people assume I'm extroverted, but it is so draining.
Yeah. I agree that I think for me, at least, the emotional cost is even higher than the cost of time of going to do it. It's the having to psych myself up to do it or be excited to do it. And also if you're new in a certain industry or environment, it's uncomfortable. And so it's literally, for some people, most people, it's going out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think maybe there are people I know that are comfortable with it, but most people, I think it's something you have to prepare yourself for mentally, psych yourself up, especially in a conference setting or a networking event setting where it's just go mingle.
Yeah.
Then you're okay, am I going to go talk to people?
Yeah.
How's it going to go? And those environments can be good because they're deliberately about networking, but that can be hard and feel a lot more forced.
Yeah.
That's kind of the big issue for me that I've worked a lot to get over is it just feels inauthentic to me. And I think the idea that you would meet someone and have this surface level connection and then build this relationship kind of just based on what you can do for each other felt dirty to me.
Yeah.
I didn't like the way it felt. It felt like exploitative or something in that vein. And so I would avoid it for a long time.
So that's specifically talking about networking events, like things that are set aside for that purpose.
Yeah.
Kind of like the speed dating, but for networking.
But just in general, like, you know, people will reach out on LinkedIn and like, hey, you know, I see we have mutual contacts, or you're in this space, we should be connected. And it just always feels a little transactional.
Yeah.
But that used to be like more when I was younger. That was kind of my big hang up. And I was like, I don't like that. It doesn't feel authentic, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, so this is kind of interesting. Back when I was working at Google, I would get so many messages from people who wanted to get into Google. And, you know, whenever I spoke to groups of younger folks, I used to mentor at colleges, I would tell them, reach out to people, shoot your shot. I would tell them that. But I would also tell them that there's a very specific way to do it. Because there were some people who reached out to me that asked to get to know more about my career, like an informational interview, and then they kept in touch. They would keep me updated on what they're up to. And then maybe later down the line, if there was an ask, they'd ask. But they were genuinely at that time doing it to get to know me, my career, the company, or maybe just a strategic way for them to network.
Sure.
And then there was the other, which is kind of what you described, which it felt like they copied and pasted. Oh, we have a lot of people in the same network. How about we connect? Cool, we're going to connect. And then what?
And then what?
What? Yeah. I don't need you to offer me something, and you know, first, but I need it to feel real.
Yeah.
So I get that, why sometimes it feels icky. But I guess over the years, I've learned to navigate like through the noise, and being on the other end of like the recipient of all those messages, like definitely I wanted to help people if it felt genuine.
Definitely. And I think for me, there was kind of a difference of like a status or like a hierarchy thing. Like if it was someone who was younger or who was in like just new in the industry, or where it was almost more of a mentorship angle, that doesn't bother me at all. And to receive those, and even to some extent to reach out that way. It feels a little different when it's more like we're peers and let's just see how we can help each other.
Yeah. I will say, I think that how we both kind of feel towards that ickiness is a blessing and a curse, because I don't know about you, I personally feel like sales is my weak area. I'm strong in pretty much all other business areas, but when it comes to sales and really trying to sell a person, it makes me so uncomfortable. But then I see other peers doing it, and they don't mind that it makes them uncomfortable, or maybe it doesn't make them uncomfortable. They just do it, and it returns money, like it returns revenue.
I mean, I used to be that way completely. So like the hint of anything salesy was a big turnoff. It's still kind of a turnoff for me to receive that. I would not engage in it. Through building my own business, I had no choice. And so eventually I figured out my own way of getting comfortable with it, in terms of like trying to convert a potential lead and do it in a way that didn't feel like pressuring them, or really more about like meeting a need. They have a need, I can meet it. Here's what it'll cost to meet it, you know, et cetera. Now being in a different role where I'm fundraising for my the fund, it's a lot of pitching, and
Liz
that
is part of the group starting an investment fund.
Starting an investment fund, or we've started an investment fund, so we're fundraising our initial round.
You have to pitch,
and so I have to pitch. It's like a critical part of my job, and our business depends on it. And now it's been a big shift between 5-7 years ago, how comfortable I feel being like, not saying this, but the subtext being like, you're stupid if you don't invest in this. Yeah. I would never say that, but like being much more salesy, not in the sense of trying to be pressure anyone, but really just pitching it. Like, this is a great product, you know?
So we're talking about networking. We talked about the LinkedIn kind of networking a little bit. And then there's in-person networking, which has so many different forms, I would say, like everything from huge conferences to more local events, like smaller events, to asking someone for a cup of coffee and to just have a coffee chat.
Yeah, it's a wide range. When I think of networking, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like a bigger event, whether
with
that's
like
a conference
where you got to wear a badge with your name.
Yeah, you wear a badge and it's like a bunch of people just like,
who can I
that's kind of like my instinct, but it does encompass all of those things, and also the nurturing of the relationship. It's not just that first meeting, it's within your network, your professional network, like how are you keeping in touch with people and maintaining that over time?
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I used to think like, oh, well, I haven't talked to someone since my last role. So if I reach out to them now because there's some relevant thing, that's going to be weird because I haven't asked about their family in 5 years or whatever. I've realized now that's just kind of how it works, you know, and it wouldn't bother me.
And you're projecting your assumptions on what you think they're going to react. You don't know that until you do it.
And sometimes you just got to shoot your shot.
So what kinds of networking would you say you do the most often?
That's a good question. Right now, it's more through someone else's introduction. So because we're pitching a lot, it'll be like someone will say, hey, you should go talk to these people.
Yeah.
So recently, we had a bunch of meetings set up for us here in LA. So it's like, you know, local people. So I'm there finding, you know, common ground, right? Like, oh, you went to school here. My friend went to school here. Oh, your kids go here.
You got a dog? Cool. I just got a new puppy.
And then following up on that. So like, for example, this is just very specific. We've had a lot of fires in LA. One of the people I recently met lived in the Palisades. So like I'm reaching out, and this is genuine, reaching out and being like, hey, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
And that's an example of how that's building a relationship with that person, but it not coming from a place of
business strategy.
It's just like, I met you and I've been thinking about you and your family, you know?
Yeah.
So kind of like that, like trying to, if you think about a network, like a web, like a spider web, you know, there's this prong and I'm like one step removed. So then trying to build those kind of inroads.
And build strong connections, because otherwise it'll just break off at some point. Like if you forget most people you meet at a conference or an event.
And the thing that I've realized over the past few years, especially being in startup mode, is there are people that are connectors. So, you know, oh, you're doing this, I should introduce you to this person. And then that person may not be the person for you, but like, oh yeah, let me talk to this guy. And I realized I have a good enough network that I can do that for people. And I've encountered a lot of people who do that, and that's a very small ask usually, or it's usually just offered. Like, oh, hey, this doesn't fit for me, but my buddy would love to hear about it.
I know some connectors who are like they want to have a little coffee chat with you so that they can find a connection. I'm like, there's no need here. Like, it's to the point where it's like they're connecting with me with things that would be great if that was my priority right now. You know, like it's like they're finding things to connect to, but I appreciate it. Because what's the opposite? That you don't have any connections for your career.
Yeah, so I found that in opposition to kind of the big, more anonymous events, that's where I'm operating most now, is kind of the more tactical, like
meet through a person,
make this intro to somebody else. And it's always interesting to see the interconnections. Yeah.
I mean, 6 degrees of separation, you could have reached a lot of people.
Seriously, yeah. What has your kind of journey with networking been like?
I used to hate it, like hate. And I, in my 20s, thought what I had was a solid career that paid me well, that I was safe at. It was going to be stable. So I didn't ever proactively network. It wasn't until the end of my stint at that job at Google that I was, starting to think about branching off, doing my own thing, entrepreneurship. I had started a business while I was working there too, a different business than Wealth for Women of Color. And during that, I realized that you have to talk to people. So even though I still wasn't great at it, I opened up myself to the idea to like attend events and chit chat. I'm very, I guess, self-aware and also hyper-aware of when something is too salesy for me. So like I could just walk away from that. But it took, I would say, years to learn that skill, to not trust everyone off the bat, but not also think everyone is a predator out to get you.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
It's like, because like, so now this is kind of getting deeper. I'm trying to think why I feel that way. And I can think of a couple instances in my childhood where my mom is like so anti-scam. So I've had family members who like sold like life insurance in like a pyramid scheme, like, and so many other things like that in my family and community, that when she spotted it, she would be like, no. Like, they're not coming to our house. They're not, no, right? Like,
Interesting.
And so much so that I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, we're not falling for no scams. But it's
not gonna bamboozle me.
Not gonna bamboozle me. But then it's like a wall is put up. So like, no, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. That's why like when people started reaching out to me on LinkedIn, you know, they just want to get to know about Google. Like, I would have this initial thought, like they just want me to refer them and get them a job.
Yeah.
But then if I started reading the messages, there were some young folks that just truly wanted guidance, informational interviews. And I did a couple. And then I ended up, when they asked me if, this was like down the line, months, years later, if they could get a referral because they saw a position they liked, I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Because if I get you hired, we're both going to get a referral bonus. Or I'm going to get a referral bonus, actually. Yeah. And I was like, that's cool with me.
Yeah, sure.
So it's kind of like in a sense recruiting talent and just helping the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that I'm trying to think of other instances, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of why, like throughout my life, when I've seen salesy, scammy events or just people, it's made me like not want to talk, not want to bring new people into my life.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, most of my network has come from people I've met more organically, at a bar, at a club, playing basketball, taking classes.
Which is so funny because you have such a broad, diverse group of friends and connections. And I was going to say classes, like from different hobbies you've pursued, and you make very strong relationships there. And then you are a connector. Like, I feel like I'm friends with all your friends.
Yeah, I'm like, you got to meet my energy healer. Yeah. You got to meet my...
Yeah. And so, but that's networking.
Yeah.
It's just not specific to a professional capacity, but it still is. Yeah, you have a very strong network.
Things come out of that. That's the crazy part, is like, that's why I feel like I do a more organic form of networking. For the most part, I feel like things form organically. And then as you build that relationship, like you said, it's so much easier to, if you ever need something, ask for something.
Sure,
or state what you need. And like people want to rush to help you because you've built up this trust.
Yeah. I think that's a big shift in the point of view of it, is it's not connecting for the sake of a transaction right now. It's just kind of building a foundation of people so that if you or someone else ever need anything, there's resources around, you know? And that doesn't have to be the purpose of it, but that's an end benefit of it.
Yeah. So I left full-time work into entrepreneurship a couple years after you did. And I realized as a solopreneur specifically how isolating it can be. And it took a while, probably a whole year, my first year of being self-employed, to find some people. I wouldn't say I have found all my people, but to find people in my same community going through the same things that I can chat with, message with, you know, whenever we need to chat about something. And that actually came out of conferences and events I attended. The specific one being FinCon for personal finance content creators and influencers, which is a very niche group, but you get all, you know, 1,000 of them into the same hotel for a conference. You meet people that are, you know,
totally like-minded.
Yeah, totally like-minded. And it's that conference, unlike any other that I've been to, felt the least salesy to me. Like, I met people who genuinely wanted to connect, stay in touch, help each other out in our businesses. And I've been to a lot of conferences when I was working at Google, like, CES, like tech conferences, and they all vary. They're all different, but FinCon probably top of my list so far in finding people that I still talk to to this day, and that, we've been able to connect each other to other resources and things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's big growth. I had a similar initial experience, but kind of for a different reason. So when I started in this industry very young, I was 18, and my feeling was I don't like this personal, internally, not distrust of others. Yeah. I don't like the way this feels, and I'm not good at it, but I'm really good at other things, so I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
That was my mindset all the time. You know what? I'm so good at other stuff that I can just skip this one.
You'll be able to get by without doing that.
I'll be able to get by just fine. It doesn't matter that much. That said, I would still periodically psych myself up. I'd try to go, and because I have an interesting breadth of my career of being in finance, but also being in marketing and design, I would go to marketing or design events to try to meet people and to try to network, or sometimes in the finance space. So thinking back, I can see the efforts and see kind of when I put myself in those positions, and some of them were fruitful. But the biggest thing is I spent 10 years at an agency working with hundreds of clients, and I didn't understand. I was the lead on most of those projects, me and the owner of the agency, but I didn't have their personal contact information all the time, right? Or I didn't go out of the way to recognize these are hundreds of people that could be just a useful contact, especially because I'm young, who I am actually working with. There's not some bullshit here. And, some of them I'd connect with on LinkedIn, but I wouldn't ever foster that. And I'm seeing how that affected me now of God, that would have been helpful if I just maintained those relationships. I kind of hit a turning point when I went into a fund company. So I was head of creative director and kind of ran the marketing side and worked really closely with the sales team. And so they had a 60-person sales team, and the business depended on the sales team. That's a fund business is all about raising money. And so I would work and do workshops for the sales team and really learned just a lot about how it works. And kind of the big, I guess, saying in finance sales, at least, is people do business with people they like. Most of the most successful guys, their biggest clients were their buddies. And it wasn't that they were friends first. It was over the years, they built these genuine friendships where they'd vacation together, they'd go, play golf or whatever. And it made me realize okay, this is a little bit different. It's more just about finding people you connect with genuinely and nurturing that. And then maybe something comes out of it later. I remember this was when I was at this firm maybe 7-8 years ago. I was living in Irvine, and I went to this design networking event, and I'm trying to kind of psych myself up. At the time in my life, I was feeling very confident, and I remember going up to people and chatting and just being what are you really excited about right now? Yeah. And the responses were confused.
Oh, why? Yeah. Instead of what's your name? What do you do?
What do you do? Yeah. Because to me, I'd rather get something a little more meaningful, and it prompted good conversations. But I just remember that what? Yeah. That kind of strange reaction. And so then after I left that company, I started my own business and had no choice. And a lot of those connections were built by me connecting to other connectors. So I'd been fortunate in meeting this person through a volunteer program where, they had all these relationships, and then they connected me to this other network.
But logistically, how does that connection happen? You reach out to them, or you're texting them, emailing?
I think it's a good question. I think most of the time I've always been very good about advertising what I'm doing. So, hey, I'm doing this.
On LinkedIn, on social media.
On LinkedIn, on social media. I built a email list of just all my personal and professional contacts and said, I'm going off on my own.
Yeah.
And
people replied.
Yeah. and said, oh, great, you're doing marketing now, or you're doing this. I have this person, you know. So I think that's a big part of it, is not being afraid to talk about it. And so that a lot of it came to me because I was, you know, advertising that. And some of it not, you know, some of it I would seek people out. So I got more comfortable with the sales part of it and stuff. And then my startup before this, that was a big turning point too, because we were like so new in this industry, and the conferences were really critical to the business. So I would be on panels, and like one conference I was on 5 panels, and yeah.
How do you talk on 5 panels?
Because I knew all about the whole industry, so I could talk about any of the topics, and so I just filled in for anybody because my role touched everything. Dang, so
I get tired off of one panel speaking at one thing.
So I was on 5 panels, and if you're on a panel, usually people come up and talk to you and say, oh my gosh, you mentioned this, can you help with this? And so it just came naturally, like as an owner in the business, you have no choice but to pitch. And I think pitching is different than selling. Mm-hmm. You know, pitching is saying, here's what I've got. It's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know, selling is, you need this. You need to buy this. Yeah. And I think I feel more comfortable with pitching and saying, you know, sure, this is how I could see it being a good fit for you, but maybe it's not. Yeah. But here's what it is.
On the cold networking LinkedIn message too, I think that same thing applies, where it's like, hey, this is what I do and what I'm up to. I saw that you do this little thing, so I know it's a personalized message. Yeah. Like, I'd love to chat or pick your brain. I know that's a cliche term, but that versus, I'm in this industry, like, you got to check this out. Like, check out my new video I posted. I'm not going to watch every single video posted to me or sent to me unless there's true value and connection here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just ignore all of those, pretty much all of them. Yeah, so now I feel much, much more comfortable, and I used to tell myself I wasn't good at it because I didn't like it.
Same.
And the reality was, I've probably always been very good at it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point where sometimes I don't mind it, depending on the context. Sometimes I still have to psych myself up, but I recognize it's really important. So
this is kind of dumb, but part of the reason too that I hated networking is because, like you said, the small talk. When, especially in my 20s, I was like, you know, the stuff me and my friends talk about is like dumb shit. Like, we laugh at everything. We have jokes. And then to put on this other persona where I'm just, oh yeah, so you're from Northern California? Yeah. Oh, I grew up here. Cool. All right. Like, it's so boring at times unless you feel a real connection and you can laugh or talk about something. That's what I feel.
You know what I have found? This is like my little, I don't know if it's a hack, but I have realized that talking about football has been the like game changer
in a male-dominated industry.
Well, and just in small talk, right? Because it is a male-dominated industry. Not everyone I encounter watches football or likes football, but most do, at least pay attention. And so it can be like, you hop on a call, there's a few like awkward minutes. Oh, like, I saw your Chiefs last weekend, and I genuinely watch it.
Yeah. Well, then you were missing out because we were trying to get Liz to watch in like college days.
I really was. I mean, I watched it, but I wasn't into it the way I am now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and not just football, but that's kind of the easier one.
Than basketball.
But still, like, sports.
Yeah.
It can be a game changer. So, like, finding those commonalities, because people are so passionate about sports, and then you get past that like very frigid conversation, and you can kind of like playfully talk shit a little bit, and then you start to build a rapport. So that's been like a little thing that has helped a lot.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what my thing is. I think I just kind of find a way to make a joke.
Yeah.
Not like on purpose. I think that's just how I talk. I always try to find something funny.
Yeah.
And if I can get someone to laugh, then it kind of builds that connection like up front.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think most people like to talk about themselves.
That's true.
In a bad way.
Yeah, so if you ask them questions.
So you ask a lot of questions. I think that's the other thing I've realized is like, I can just ask questions and I can be good at that. And so especially like if you find out they have a dog or they have kids, like, oh, how old are your kids? Oh, you know, and like they light up. Like that's their pride and joy. You know, like if you can find what people are interested in and get them excited and get them to talk about that, then you actually get to know who they really are a little bit more. And then you have something memorable about them as well. One more thing in terms of my journey, joining or starting this fund was really eye-opening for me in terms of the importance of networking, because I'm looking like, all right, we have 7 co-founders of, you know, different levels, and we're trying to raise money from 0 to 100 million to a billion, or, you know, wherever we end up getting.
Yeah.
Who do we talk to?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, that's when I realized I had all of these relationships from my, you know, a few roles ago that I remembered them, I had worked with them, but we weren't in contact.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like literally couldn't contact them, or there wasn't enough familiarity where it would have been really helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I wish I all along
had kept in touch.
I had been nurturing these, or former colleagues that I worked with directly. Like, I wish I kept in touch a little bit more so it wouldn't be quite so awkward when I reach out. I've still reached out.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, some have gone well and some haven't.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, okay, now is the time where, you know, I have another colleague that I've learned a lot from, who's been in the industry for like 30 years. And he keeps his own personal kind of CRM, customer client relationship management system, but basically a spreadsheet of all of his relationships. And it is valuable. I mean, he has ownership in the business for that reason. And that's something I was advising my younger brother, who's also in finance and earlier, more junior. Like, you're building contacts right now, but they're all in your company's system.
You got
to the extent that it is legal, because sometimes there's ownership stuff. Make sure you're carrying that over with you for your next role, and don't be like, oh my gosh, now I don't work there anymore. What's their email address?
Yeah. Connect on LinkedIn. Do what you got to do. Stay connected.
There's things I just didn't know when I was younger.
On that note, I want to give myself some credit, because earlier I said I hated networking and I never did it when I was at Google. But to be fair, I did what you're talking about, which is I nurtured so many relationships there, just as coworkers, colleagues, like beyond just being colleagues. I made so many friends that I end up hanging out with outside of work. Maybe too much. Like, it's not the norm. Like, we would be going out to like bars.
Yeah.
You know, random stuff.
A good friend. You're good at making friends.
I made tons of friends, and I had a connection with every team I worked on, because we would do fun cultural things at the company, like make internal videos, because I worked at YouTube, so we would make YouTube videos that was just for the company to see. And so we did all these fun things that got us to connect with people. And so I was nurturing those relationships. And then my department, I got laid off, and then not too long after, the whole department got laid off, and everyone was scrambling looking for jobs. And I saw so many people on that team help other people get jobs at other, you know, at Amazon, Netflix, Meta, all these other places, but even small places too, like production houses. And for me, I feel like if I really wanted to get another corporate job, it would be that stat where like most of them come from connections versus just applying cold. And I feel like I have that network to reach out to if I wanted to.
Definitely, without a doubt. Yeah. That rings true for me, at least I've mostly been in small businesses, and probably at least half of the people I've hired or we've hired as a team have come through a relationship, not like a job applicant. Not everybody. And that can be good and bad, honestly. That is a double-edged sword, right? Because sometimes the relationship supersedes the work product, and you're like, oh, actually, we gave them the benefit of the doubt, but they're not great.
Yeah.
It can be a little complicated. But yeah, if you're looking for opportunities, it's a great way.
There's this networking event that my husband went to, that Alan went to. And so he was like, I'm going to a networking event. In my head, I pictured, I don't know, the corner of a bar, high top tables where people are just mingling and doing little small talk or whatever. And then he comes home and he has this swag bag. I'm not talking about like a small bag. I'm talking about a big ass swag bag that had like tech products in it.
Oh.
And it wasn't it had like this mug that has a warmer on the bottom, and it wasn't like a cheap flimsy one. It was like a legit one, because I always get scared of those, like they're gonna like catch on fire.
Yeah.
But no, like I looked it up, I was like, oh man, this is an expensive, like that is an expensive piece of swag. And like I'm like, how do I come? Can I just come? And he's like, no, it's not like one of those. It's actually, it's a networking event sponsored by a company, and then they send like invites to other companies, and it's a sit down dinner, and that's why they're able to give, this swag. So I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, so
I guess I've never gotten invited.
Well, so that's funny that you say that. I've learned a little bit about this world too. So, we're fundraising, so we're trying to go to different conferences, but there are certain events for family offices. So a family office is if, say someone is a multimillionaire, like let's say hundreds of millions or a billionaire, significant amount of wealth. They're not just going to have like a regular financial advisor managing their money, because it's complicated. They have, they have a whole estate and everything. So they will set up what's called a family office, which is kind of like its own investment business to manage that money. And sometimes they partner with other families and whatnot. But because they manage so much money, they're like a coveted contact. Most of them don't advertise at all. They often don't have websites. They're very private, because this is like, Bill Gates or somebody. Anyway, so there are kind of like private events just for groups of those, or for people who are trying to pitch to those, like very, very exclusive. Like
sharing trusted contacts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they'll go to like Jackson Hole and have like a hunting trip for like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. My one of my co-founders got invited to one of them.
Well, I've learned about those things in watching shows like Succession. Yeah, and like Billions. Exactly. Yeah, like they do these things
and it's real.
It's like a whole world that exists that everyday people like us don't even
there's a lot of
know about
exclusivity. Yeah. And it's a different kind of networking.
Yeah. Well, that actually reminds me. So obviously that's like top tier 1% kind of secret societies, but there's networking like groups and communities too. Yeah. How do you feel about those? Have you ever been part of one?
I have. Oh, actually, okay.
There's one like a woman's one that
I've been. I'm trying to think. I've been part of like trade associations. Yeah. Like AIGA is one for design. I was really involved in that, and I actually made some very strong relationships there, and like mentors and such. I was part of one, and I can't think of what it's called right now. I want to say the League, but that was a dating app.
Yeah, that was a dating app. But it was similar to that.
That's why it was in LA. The Ivy.
It was like an invite only.
Yeah, you had to be like invited.
It was like a Soho House. Like you have to pay a yearly couple $1,000.
It was similar to that. Membership. It didn't have like physical places like a Soho House, but it was that same kind of thing. I did that for a while, and they would have like exclusive events, and it was kind of cool. It wasn't that expensive, but not a ton came out of it. Yeah. But at the same time, that's kind of, to some extent, you get out what you put in. I think something like a Soho House, a lot of people find worthwhile. Now, how much of that is just because it has some cachet?
Yeah.
Or just being physically in a space where there's other people and there's some exclusivity?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's hard to create a members only club that really provides a ton of value and also can attract the right people. Yeah. But I think they exist.
Yeah.
You did mention the AIGA.
Yeah.
So I am part of the Financial Planning Association, as well as the AFCPE, which is for financial counselors, and they have virtual workshops. They have, membership forums where you can chat and meet people and then network off of there. And I feel like that's always way easier than, LinkedIn or something cold, because you already have a connection. Like, we're both financial counselors. I saw that you were doing this. Let's chat. And everyone always says yes. I've never had someone say no.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like professional associations or volunteer organizations are some of the best ways obviously that's not why you join certainly a volunteer organization, but one of the best ways to network, especially with more senior people, people who would never answer a cold email, or it wouldn't even get to them, like their contact information is not publicized, but they're part of these things and they're involved, and you can build that relationship.
All right, so we've talked about costs, which are a lot of emotional costs depending on who you are and how comfortable you are with it. The cost of time, I think that's the main two costs. Oh, I guess you pay for conferences and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. There's some financial costs there.
And then benefits, obviously, further your career or life. And
relationships. I think that's one of the biggest things is you talked about making friends with your people, your colleagues. And that's kind of a shift, right? If you think about it, I'm making connections versus I'm here to make friends. I'm here to make some relationships and see what comes of it.
One of my closest friends from my old job is now a toilet paper mogul.
I know.
He's like one of the founders of Who Gives a Crap toilet paper. I'm like, it's just so great because we're friends. We were coworkers back then, but we both don't work there anymore, and we're friends. He's gonna come to the wedding, so it's gonna be fun.
Can't wait.
All right, so we have the pros and cons. Before we wrap up, do you have go-to tips for people who want to get better at networking?
Sure, yeah. So I mentioned a few already. So like asking questions, I think, is the easiest way. You don't have to talk about yourself necessarily. And so I think if you go into an event with like a couple questions you're going to ask that you can fall back on if you feel a little bit awkward, or even a couple topics. Like obviously people it's a cliche, but people always talk about the weather. That's the number one thing people talk about. Like, so where are you at? Oh, is it cold there? Oh, no, it's warm here. Every meeting I have, that's what people talk about. But it's fine. It's easy, right? So you can talk about the weather. You can talk about sports. You can talk about the holidays, kids, whatever. Just to ease in. And then follow up, right? So someone says something. Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Oh, or how did you like that? Like just kind of those things.
Yeah.
And then I think if you're trying to challenge yourself, say, my goal is to talk to 5 people, right? It can be manageable. 3, 1, whatever. And depending on your objectives, that can be a big number because you're trying to meet more people, or it can be a smaller number and you're trying to have more depth to it. And then this is the part that I'm still not great at, is the follow-up and like the maintenance of it. And it can be a challenge. That's just something that's hard for me in general.
Okay, this is not the end of the episode. I just came up with like 3 more stories in my head
with
you saying that. So there's a woman that I recently had a virtual chat with, and it's because at the end of the year, last year in December, she sent out what looked like an email that was copied and pasted, but there was a whole paragraph that was specific to me. It was like hey, here's what I've been doing. I would love to catch up in the new year, see what you've been up to. I saw that you were doing this. If you want to chat and have a coffee chat, like schedule a call. And I thought that was smart because I don't know if she front loads all her networking at one point in the year or does it multiple times in the year. But like if you put it in your calendar to like twice a year, remember to reach out to these 10 people just to see what they're up to, and it maintains that connection. So that's a tip, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I noticed that she did that, and I was like, I need to do something more routine like that.
So I used to do, when I was, more active in my own business, my consulting business, I would do a weekly email. Weekly was a lot, but it was very effective. So I would have some kind of like story or kind of body content, story, something that happened, some lesson, something informational. And then the bottom would be like basically things that happened this week, what I'm reading, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, my latest playlist, like just a bunch of random, more personal stuff. The amount of responses I would get every week, like just personal responses, because I would send it to my professional network and my personal network. And it helps you stay so top of mind. You don't have to do it every week, but people would like tell me they really enjoyed reading it. And, it was like a little bit of work to create, but not much. It was mostly just like literally what I did this week. I played with Legos and I made cookies. And I had a hard week. Yeah.
That's a great motivator for me because I send on average 1 email per every 6 months. It's not great. And I am actually building out a list. And I have a sequence that goes out when you first join
Sure.
my list. And then after that, and then on one of the and like last emails, it says, P.S. You'll hear from me like once or twice a month. I laugh because I don't send emails once or twice a month, but I feel like I'd get so many more of those connections with people if I just told them what I was doing.
Yeah, and for me, it happened just kind of organically because like I started it in the very beginning when I created this list of everybody I knew and was just like, hey, I have a business now. And so at first I was a little afraid of like bothering people because I genuinely knew a lot of these people. They'll unsubscribe if they don't want to see it, and very few did. But then I think the thing for me that was effective was it wasn't sales content. There was always some tie-in to branding or business, but it was really just like, you know, for example, we've been talking about this week about getting haters on your YouTube comments and stuff. So like one week I had like a hater and they called me out for something and I shared it in my email.
And they had your back.
Yeah, I just shared it. I was like, this happened, and like, you know what that means? It means you're doing something right.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, last thing before we wrap up with 20 cents. I have a story time, and I want your take. It's a story time about business cards.
Okay.
So when I started my first, well, I guess it was technically my second business, but I started a business with a friend. We're 50-50 owners, and this was the first time we really went into a venture like that together. We spent like a month of meetings trying to figure out the name of the company and the logo. And then because we had to be able to market ourselves because we needed business cards so bad. And then at that point, like the place that I found business cards that were affordable and they were good quality, like the minimum you could order was like 500.
Yep.
This is like 8-9 years ago. I swear I still had all the boxes last year. I must have thrown them away. I think I threw them away because I'm like, we're just never, ever going to use this. We've rebranded. Our logo is different now. I don't even use that phone number anymore. It's like, so thoughts on business cards at like.
Oh my God, that's happened to me so many times. So my very first, when I started, it might have been before Liz Marie Strategy, but one of the iterations of a business that I had, I did the same thing. I was like, this is going to be so important. And because I've been in this design space and I know probably too much about like printing and like really high quality printing and the cards and like not so digital printing is like, you know, you have your own printer. Offset printing is when they like layer on the ink and that's higher quality.
Yeah.
So like I went to an offset printer to get it.
Yeah.
And I got, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 and maybe gave out 15, 20. And then a year later I rebranded.
Yeah. I will say I have in my mind people that have stood out because they did something unique.
Yeah.
So I met this woman, Markia Brown, the Money Plug, if you know her on socials. And when I first met her, it was at a smaller event. It wasn't FinCon, but it was like a smaller version of that. She had business cards that were like credit cards.
Yeah.
With her info on it because she's a credit specialist.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and so that stuck in my mind, but like it's kind of a different industry because we're all connected anyway because of we're on social media. But that stood out to me. And then there's another woman that I met last year who she gave out cookies and so like, you know, when people give you food, you never know if like you could trust it or not. But this was at FinCon, it was fine, and she was actually Filipino and she was passing out ube cookies. And so even if I think I actually did eat it, but even if you didn't eat the cookie, you remember that someone went out of their way to put their little QR code and packed this. And so I did something similar. You went to New Orleans with me when I went to FinCon. You didn't actually go to the conference, but remember I brought little baggies to give away. So I packed like 25 brown bags with some of my swag in it and put my not business card, but put my info on it. And I just was more selective of who I would give that out to. Rather than carrying like 100 business cards to people who are going to throw them away, I'm like, let me just focus on 20, 25 people. If I have a good conversation with them, I'm going to just pull out and say, hey, like, here's my, you know.
I think those things can be very effective. And so now, like my current business, we don't have business cards. We've been in business almost a year. there's maybe been one meeting I've been in with people handed me a card.
Because it's silly now that we have email and we have phones.
There's digital business cards. Yeah. And so because my prior firm, I had made that same thing where we order them and then my role changes or a phone number changes and so I had like 3 different boxes. To be fair, I actually used a whole box one time.
Yeah.
But the amount, I throw them away now because I've had boxes and boxes where I've never used them. But when I would go to conferences through my business, Liz Murray Strategy, I would have a booth or something and I would do stickers. That was like always my giveaway, and not like stickers of my logo. They'd be like cool stickers, like people would use, like badass or like a flame, thunderbolt and stuff like that. And people would go crazy for them. And they'd also be like, can I have one of each? Like, can I give them to my kids? And so that was cool because that was like a little bit more memorable. Yeah. And I think investing in just thoughtfully in those kind of like little tchotchkes and stuff like that can be worthwhile.
Yeah. 20 cents?
20 cents.
20 cents is the segment of the show where both Lizzy and myself, Lissa, each get 60 seconds to give our 2 cents on today's topic, whether it's a net positive or net negative for networking. Where does 20 cents come from?
Because you get the opinion of 2 dimes, y'all. 2 dimes.
2 dimes. All right, I feel like this is going to be a really quick 20 cents, but you're up first, Liz. 60 seconds on the clock. Is networking worth it?
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. Yeah. I wish little 18-year-old Lizzy knew more, and I started sooner appreciating it. But yeah, it's absolutely worth it for many reasons. It can be really beneficial to you in your career, helping you meet your goals, helping you learn, but it also can connect you to really cool and interesting people. So yeah, without a doubt, it is worth it and is worth working through whatever discomfort you may have with it.
All
right. What about you, Lise?
Net positive, especially because I'm an entrepreneur with a couple businesses and brands that I'm trying to grow, with the asterisk that says if you do it the right way. And I don't know that there's one right way. It's finding what works for you. Because if you're just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and going to random ass conferences that you're not going to get anything out of, but you've paid $500, $1,000 to be there, don't do that. Like, reach out to people, see if they'll do an informational one-on-one, grab a coffee, you can set aside a $5, $10 budget to take someone to coffee and they'll gladly share information with you that could further your career or business. So that's net positive for sure. But I wouldn't make it icky. Like, make it fun if you can.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Why not make it fun?
Why not make it fun?
Yeah. All right, double net positive, y'all.
Double net positive. Well, remember, this is what we think at this moment in time. No one can make that decision but you. So what do you think? Is networking worth it? Is it worth your time?
Hit us up. Let us know what you think. DM us on Instagram at NetNetPodcast or email us at hi@netnetpodcast.com. And if you want to follow us individually, here's where you can find us.
I'm at Wealth for Women of Color on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.
And I'm at live_well_Lizzy on Instagram and TikTok.
All references, statistics, and resources mentioned can be found in our show notes. This podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be constituted as financial advice. Remember to always do your own research, consult a professional as needed, and feel empowered to make your own damn decisions.